Good Wednesday evening and welcome to Overtime here on WOTM. I am Gerhard Mathangani, joined by our normal Wednesday guest, Mark Everett Kelly, our expert researcher / historian. First off, Mark had a double dip of who's better. We had one Monday night. We'll have one coming up tonight as well. Another look into Atlanta Braves, but now we're going to kind of go two former Braves. I also play for other organizations, has some really key and interesting numbers. We'll dive into that. We'll also dive into the College Baseball World Series. Two of the three teams still alive after one of the teams saved themselves yesterday. Also go into the NBA playoffs and a little news out of the college basketball world as it relates to Alabama. But first, we'll start with the current team with the Atlanta Braves as of right now. Braves taking on the Mets after a series with the Boston Red Sox and a series against the St. Louis Cardinals. 1-2 of 3 going into this series against the Mets, and they sit 35 and 37 overall. What are some of your takeaways so far of what the Braves are doing on the road in this series against the Metropolitans?
Well, you look at the fact that their pitching's really picked up. If you were a Braves fan, you're a little worried after they give up 10 runs in back-to-back games against the Red Sox at home, where they were unable to hold on to leads after coming back in games where their pitching got manhandled the first two games of that series. Tucker Davidson got hit hard, and Anniston got hit hard. Two of their younger starters that they're going to count on heavily to give major innings down the stretch here. So that would concern me at the beginning of last week. Since then, it's been a total 180, where you've had 7 games. 5 of those games, they've held their opponents to 1 run or fewer, and then 4 of those games are shutouts. Now, it helped a little that you had some doubleheaders in there, so maybe you're not going a full 9 innings. But the other thing that the Braves got to do and look forward to now is when they were in New York a couple weeks ago, there were major rainouts. It always seems that rainouts are following the Mets this year, so they only play 1 game of a weekend series. So this was kind of going to be something that both teams could look at and say, where are we in relation to each other? The Mets have to answer the question, can we beat Atlanta when it matters?
Yeah.
And Atlanta wants to know, is this Met team any better than the Met teams we've dominated in the past? They've been decimated by injuries, but they've managed to stay afloat.
Right.
And they're getting some of their players back now. You saw in game 4 of the series today, you saw Conforto back where people didn't think he'd come back yet from hamstring. McNeil back, who had an injury a couple weeks ago too, that they thought he'd be out a little deeper into the year. We know that there's no Syndergaard. We know that Carlos Carrasco, kind of like Jed Lowry. I remember they got Jed Lowry in 2019.
Right.
Lowry didn't play all year from some knee injury. And Carrasco was another key offseason matchup along with Lindor that they were counting on to be a major starter, a guy that has put up big innings, big numbers last couple of years with Cleveland, has not been heard from this year.
Exactly.
And you don't know when he's coming. Syndergaard, you don't know when he's coming. And Syndergaard, you know, is a tough guy who loves to pitch against Atlanta, and he represents kind of the overall old school way of playing baseball for a pitcher. And I'd be real interested to see how he does in some of these things with pandas and everything else going around. Everybody high-fiving and dancing in the dugouts. Seems like it's more of a disco than baseball. But no, it's just guys having fun. But I think if I'm a pitcher and I see some of that, I would love to see Syndergaard's reaction. So going into this last game 4 here, the Braves are in second place. They're where they want to be after struggling through the first half of June. And today's game is going to be a good indicator because you have McGill going against one of the Braves pitchers who doesn't really. The Mets struggle against unknown Braves guys, as we've seen in the last couple of days. So this is going to be whoever can win this game. If the Mets can win it, then they split the series, and it shows that they've stayed even when they're just getting their players back. And if Atlanta wins, they're able to come back off of 2 hard losses to Boston. And since then, against St. Louis and the Mets, they've been able to set the tone and beat teams that most people would say are going to be near the top of the National League heading into the postseason.
One of the things you talked about towards the beginning of the year is you thought that there might be basically a current where the Braves kind of find their streak and find their stride and overtake the Mets. And you also mentioned there was crucial parts of the Mets season that you thought would be hard for them to kind of get out of. Are we reaching that mesh point, so to speak, that crush point, so to speak, in this particular series? Or is it still too early to say, hey, at this particular point, the Mets are X, the Braves are Y, and we still have not a lot of a sample size. We have a bit of a sample size, but not a lot. Do you think this is the point where, whether it's confidence that sets in, whether it's a momentum factor that sets in, where the Braves now start to overtake the Mets, or are we still too young in the season and still too young between these two rivals?
Yeah, I think we're still a little too early in the season. I mean, we're not at the All-Star break yet. Usually after the All-Star break, that's when teams really find out if they're going to buy or sell. And I know if you're the Mets right now, you're a definite buyer. Same thing if you're Atlanta, you're definite buyers. Just how much are you willing to buy? Atlanta's got more ready prospects that are about to come up that can contribute to whether they make the postseason or not this year. For them, the Mets don't have those guys.
Right.
They might need to go out and give up some of their younger prospects. They have some really dominating prospects in A-ball, single A-ball, and in low A-ball that are going to be, I think, very good players in the years to come, but they are nowhere near the major leagues right now. And you saw when they gave up Jared Kelenic a couple years ago in that trade for Diaz and Robinson Cano, a lot of Met fans didn't like that. They didn't like giving up on that young first-round talent. So I don't know if the Mets would do that again and trade some of their young catcher. I know they have a young catcher on the international racket that they got a couple years ago. That's one of the better hitters in their organization. Brett Batty was a third baseman, was a high draft pick a couple years ago. All those guys are doing pretty well. So, but the Braves have guys that are ready to come up, like Drew Waters, and you saw Tucker Davidson. So I think they're ready to do that if they want to. The Braves can also go out and get stopgap guys that can probably fill their need until their minor league players are ready, or until we find out what's going to go on with Ozuna. I don't know, and it's been quiet along the.
Nobody really knows, because that's a lot to handle as far as from the legal standpoint.
It is, and who knows what's going to happen with that? It's what an unfortunate situation to happen, and for the Braves to have to deal with, and for that to have to affect their season. So we'll see what happens as far as being able to get fill-ins for that, and going forward, even into next year, if the Braves are going to go more long-term with their replacements, or just kind of stopgap and wait until their prospects are ready. The Mets have a little different strategy, because they're meant to win now, and I think their whole organization with this with the new owner and everything, if they don't make the playoffs this year for the Mets after the Lindor trade, and with some of their players getting older, like DeGrom only has a couple more years dominating like he does. Syndergaard, you don't know if he comes back, how many more years he's got. Diaz, all these guys are kind of, getting into their, late 20s, early 30s. So the Mets are a little more in need to have to win now. And I expect them, if they are in a position like they are now, to make one or two major deals at the trade deadline, where they can get a guy, whether it's an outfielder or another pitcher or another bullpen guy, that's really going to be able to put them on the top. Right now, I would say that there's not that much of a difference. If they hit a cold streak and Atlanta hits a hot streak, Atlanta can easily pass them.
Right.
And then also you have to ask, if you're a Met fan, what's going to happen to Marcus Stroman? He gets injured again the other day. Is DeGrom going to be able to be relied on and pitch more than 3 innings? He did the other day against the Braves, but it always seems like he has a problem with a lat pull or a muscle pull or something like that. Same thing with Taijuan Walker, but I think a lot of pitchers too. I mean, you just saw Lucchesi, the left-hander, he's out for the year with Tommy John surgery. So all of these things happen so quickly. Injuries happen like in a blink of an eye, and it goes from you're a contender to now you got to replace a guy who you thought was going to be the long-term, especially with pitching. And the Braves have some of those same worries. But we saw, like last night, if Charlie Morton pitches the way he's done the last 2 outings, which has really been dominating, then I think Atlanta will be fine as their starting staff kind of rounds off.
Next up, what we'll talk about in baseball is something that has been talked about for a while as far as what we're going to look into, and that's pitchers for foreign substances, checking them for foreign substances. And now we've gotten to a point where we're in a situation in baseball where now managers are checking players. We're only a couple of days into this, but we already have some drama. Max Scherzer just last night had some issues with Joe Girardi. Let's play that. Yesterday alone, we had 2 different instances, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. And the instance right here with Max Scherzer and Joe Girardi ended up getting, I wouldn't say necessarily too personal between those two in particular, but it started getting personal just in general. And you saw Max Scherzer get frustrated, throw his hat down, take off his belt, and another guy drop his pants down on the West Coast as well. Does baseball need to check on this? Are we going into a situation where baseball will need to look into this a little bit further, a little bit deeper, or do you just consider this maybe just some early stages of, hey, you took these foreign substances out of the game, trust me, I don't have these foreign substances on.
It's almost like early stages of dementia with Major League Baseball. They never do anything right. They take something that's a problem and make it a problem that's 10 times worse. If you have a rule in a game where you can't, there's no limit to the amount of times that a manager can ask if the pitcher is using a foreign substance. If I was a manager, I would do it almost after every pitch, like we had talked about earlier, trying to rattle the pitcher, and that's clearly what Girardi's trying to do to Scherzer here. And Scherzer's a bit of a mental case, so he's going to lose it when his flow is being interrupted. Pitchers get very sensitive when their flow during the game is interrupted.
Yep.
I mean, I played with a guy in college who would turn into an absolute monster when you would ask him just a wrong question because he had such a focus on what he was trying to do during the game. And so these guys do not want to be interrupted. And if you have to keep going out there and saying, hey, what do you have here, what do you have there, I could honestly see guys just taking their clothes off, and doing what Romo did, or just kind of making a mockery of it, because there needs to be some kind of regulation. You can't just say, oh, let's go out and say it after every pitch, because that's what managers are going to do. They don't really want to have to do this.
Yeah.
The pitchers, the players, the hitters, they don't want to have to be bothered to think about all these other things going on in the game. If a pitcher's using something, then a team will either know, or they can say something then, maybe have like at the most 2 of those opportunities where you would try and see if a pitcher actually had something on him because the ball was moving. But to be unlimited, it's something that can lead to many more problems, and you're going to see it get to the point of just lunacy in the next couple of days. I really think by the weekend there will be a change in the amount of times you can do that. Don't you think so?
I think so too. I mean, I think the commissioner will come out. He's already said, Commissioner Manfred's already come out and said that he thinks overall it's been pretty good. We've had no ejections so far. That's the biggest thing, just making sure the pitchers aren't using anything. That's the overlying thing. I think you just don't want these ugly instances, and I think we'll still have those. It's competitive. These are competitive players, competitive people at the highest level of the sport. You're going to have this no matter what. I think it's going to get personal, and I think it'll get personal between certain managers and certain players, maybe certain catchers and certain pitchers.
Yep.
It'll get personal with them, especially any of those that have had a history. I think it'll get personal with them. How demonstrative they get, I think that's when baseball needs to rule it down. I don't think that we'll get to a situation where we'll get any fights, we'll get any brawls, because I think baseball will step in. What that rule will be, what the rule needs to be between now and then, I'm not sure, but I think baseball will come up with something.
Let me ask you something. Has there been a worse commissioner in sports than Manfred?
Well, the thing is that I think that he's locked in a really tough position, because the baseball players union is the strongest in all, not just in sports.
No,
I'm talking about teachers unions. I'm talking about steel workers unions. I'm talking about coal miners. The baseball union has been so strong, and he's had to fight on so many different issues just to get the 23 owners on his side to get anything ratified. I think working with basically one hand tied behind his back, I don't consider him the worst, but he is the worst of the Big Four. That's for sure. But I do think the way that the baseball is structured, I don't think that he can win on these kind of grandiose things. And like I said, even right now, the penalties aren't tough because you have to be collectively bargained. And the players with their union, they're so freaking strong.
Right.
I think that he's doing the best that he can. And every commissioner coming after COVID, he being the first one of all major sports, he and Adam Silver for the NBA. It makes their job just so much tougher.
Well, I think that there are things where you obviously got to consider the fact that the union is as strong as it is. But we already know that. We've known it for years. But I'm talking about something that's simple that he makes more difficult. Why you would have an unlimited rule, that's something that you can really set and say,
rain down on.
Yeah, okay, let's make it a little easier so that way we can't just have this run wild. And there should be some kind of a limit. I don't understand. That's an easy thing to get right.
Yeah. Or a penalty if you're wrong. You get two of them, and if you're wrong,
right.
I don't know what it would be.
For the manager, but for the players, you understand that that's going to be a long walk, to having get the Players Association agree with it and all that stuff.
Won't happen this year.
Penalties for players, I understand that might be a little longer road. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just, how many times can you challenge a pitcher, and how many times can that happen in an inning, in a game? For it to be unlimited is just dumb. And I think to not see this coming is a major problem.
I think they came in with the spirit of the rule being one thing, but then you take it to these kind of advanced measures and you get something else. I honestly think that it'll work itself out. We will see more ugly instances, but hopefully it's not too many as they move forward.
It's fun, though.
Okay, yeah, moving forward here on Overtime, we will talk about college basketball. Alabama will lace it up against a non-conference opponent, and a very, very good one of the best ones ever. And we'll talk about that coming up next here on Overtime.